You don't have to be the expert. As leaders, we want to be the experts. We want to be the people that they go to for all the answers. This is a case where it's okay if they don't. But we just need to be willing to show that we're willing to learn and model those kinds of behaviors so that our employees are able to at least emulate them and at least make attempts in driving their understanding and knowledge of these tools further. Now, will I say that these tools have had impacts in terms of how we do certain jobs, how we perform certain functions? Absolutely, that will not change. Things are still evolving. As AI gets better, we will definitely see more and more capabilities that we haven't even thought about that could be either automated or enhanced. But I still feel that the human element will be there. What that I think will probably lead to is more than likely there will be different jobs, maybe jobs that we don't even have names for yet. But it doesn't mean that work goes away. And as you can imagine, AI usage and leadership around usage of these tools was a very hot topic. And the one thing that continuously came up was those who are willing to be in a testing mode, those who are willing to test, those who are willing to at least tell their people, look, I'm going to admit it, I don't know all the answers, but let's test and figure out together how this can work. I think that goes a long way. It's a fallible tool created by a fallible being, aka humans, and therefore it can make mistakes. It will make mistakes, and therefore it's still important for us to make sure that, again, we're validated. It's important for us to make sure that, okay, well, it didn't get me there 100% of the way, but what if it could get me there 60% of the way, 70, even 50% of the way? That's still a greater efficiency in terms of time savings that we can get back, that we can then use to focus on other things.
Welcome to another episode of The Future of Learning, where we explore how organizations are navigating the tension between technological acceleration and human capability development. My name's Andy. I am Director of Partnerships at eLMS. And today's conversation is particularly fascinating because my guest occupies a space that very few people do. He's simultaneously living in two worlds that are both being fundamentally reshaped by AI. Dr. Remberto Jimenez, Rem, to his colleagues and friends, is a Director of Learning and Development at Clear Channel Outdoor, where he's responsible for developing B2B sales capability for a global advertising firm. But here's what makes his perspective invaluable. Every evening, he steps into a completely different role as an adjunct professor, teaching the next generation of instructional designers and educational technologists. This means Rem isn't just theorizing about the future of workplace learning, he's building it during the day and then teaching people how to prepare for it at night. He's watching two parallel transformations unfold: corporate L&D teams grappling with AI adoption and university students asking whether their degrees will matter in an AI-powered world. Now, with a doctorate in educational technology leadership, published research on everything from third-party learning platforms to podcasting as informal adult learning, and a background that includes leading L&D at American Express, Rem brings both academic rigor and practical battle-tested wisdom. So, today, we're diving deep into some uncomfortable questions. Are we preparing people for jobs that won't exist? Is AI really a partner, or are we kidding ourselves? And what separates organizations that successfully adopt learning technology from those that waste millions on tools nobody uses? Rem, welcome to the Future of Learning. Is that a fair introduction?
That's a fair introduction, and thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk about this topic because I can tell you it's very near and dear to my heart, but more importantly, it's a topic that I think we are all grappling with right now, regardless of whatever vertical or industry that you're in. It is the big question: how should we be preparing our folks for AI? How should we be looking at AI? And how can we use AI for the future of work, for the future of what I consider to be the future of education, and more importantly, how do we use it in an ethical, in a responsible way?
Absolutely. We will unpack that undoubtedly as we go. So let's start with your unique position. Okay. You're leading learning strategy for a global advertising firm during the day, as we've said, and you're teaching future instructional designers at night. So what are you noticing in the gap between what's being taught in universities about workplace learning and what's actually needed when someone steps into a corporate L&D role today?
I think there's three particular gaps that I particularly notice. One is definitely the use of tools that involve AI. And I say tools that involve the use of AI because there are your large language models, your chat GPTs, your Copilots, and so forth that there are topics and tools that are being used today. But what I'm also seeing is that there's many other tools that are including elements of AI, whether it's workflow tools like Asana, whether you're looking at e-learning development tools like Articulate, Storyline as an example. It's something that our folks need to get familiar with and be comfortable using, because if it's not a tool that we are going to use like a ChatGPT or Copilot, it's a tool that has AI already embedded within it. So there is implications there in terms of usage. There's implications there in terms of, well, is it truly an AI language learning model type of application that's capturing information? If so, is it an open loop system? Is it a closed loop system? Because those have implications from a legal perspective.
Huh?
So I have to think about not only the usage of these tools, but how the data is being stored and who is using that data, both internally and externally, from a compliance perspective. And then last but not least, it's also about the fact that these tools are adding all these additional elements, at a very quick speed. And the learning curve now becomes just a little more steeper as we're trying to get our employees to be more comfortable and, at best, not only comfortable, but using these tools in such a way that it becomes part of their natural workflow versus, oh my God, this can do this without me now. I don't need to be here anymore. I'm going to have my job replaced in 6 months to a year, because that's some of the prevailing, I would say, mentality that I've seen. That's the first piece. The second piece is getting, what I see as a gap is getting this idea out of some of our more recent graduates. Hi, I just graduated from school. I learned all these wonderful things in school. I did some internships. I'm great. Pay me $100,000 a year or more.
Yeah.
But what they haven't realized is it's not just about the education. It's also about the experience. It's about what are you bringing to the table. And many times you're going to start out, especially if you're fresh out of school, you're going to start out at some sort of introductory level position. And I think there needs to be some level setting that needs to happen both in education and academia, because I think what's happening is they see this idea of these positions have, oh yeah, I can make so much money. I want to make so much money. I can work virtual. I can do all these things. And when they get into the workforce, they start to realize this is not what I thought it was going to be, because there's a lot of misperception out there. They also have the misperception of, well, I'm just going to go work for Google, or I'm going to go work for Amazon. And what happens is there are many folks who don't even get their applications even looked at by those organizations. So it's about helping, I would say, the future workers of the world understand and level set, like, what's the reality? What is real when they get out of college? And for those folks who are looking to move from, which is the third element, by the way, those people who are looking to move to other organizations because they want to make more money, because they want more flexible work hours, or whatever their rationale reasons may be. They also have to understand that you may have years of experience, but now you're coming into a place where you're at a deficit. You're going to have to start from ground zero. So you can't just expect to come in and say, I'm here, I'm wonderful, I'm now going to lead an organization, I'm not going to get promoted in a year. There's a lot of misperceptions that are out there. I guess it's about setting proper a reality check, if you will, with folks. But if I had to take those three and look at the real problem, the real issue that to me is just extremely pervasive, it's this issue of AI And AI as a tool that they see is going to replace them, as a tool that they see is going to eliminate the job that they have studied, in some cases, 4+ years for. And now they're realizing some of those jobs are going away. And it's hard for them to even rationalize how can this be? I just spent all this money. I have all this time I've invested in these degrees, and now you're telling me half those jobs may go away. Because when you look at all that, I think the real question has to be, it's not so much about that your job is going away. It's more about your job is changing. Your job is going to evolve. It is not what you necessarily saw in the classroom, and it's not necessarily what you've read about, because AI is changing at such a breakneck speed. It's important for us to really ask ourselves, okay, what does that new normal look like? And be willing to, I'd say, walk with a little bit of trepidation and caution as we walk into these roles and say to ourselves, how can I, the human being, help this new position, this role evolve and become something else with the use of AI workflow? How do I, the individual, play a role? Because I think what most people are definitely coming in with, and I've seen this with many summer interns that I work with as well that come into the corporate world, their belief is AI is going to just take their job, that their entry-level jobs may not exist. And that may be true to a certain extent, but it's that what will be the new introductory level job is going to change very drastically. It's not that those jobs go away, it's that they become something else, because now they're using AI for AI-related tools that will help to automate. So it's a different set of skills. It's a different mindset. It's also shifting the perspective of, it needs to be all about how do we make that human and AI integration come together so that it's not just simply AI. Because if you just let AI run its course and do its own thing, someone has to check it. Someone has to validate it. Someone has to make sure the workflows are working. Someone has to know how to go in and check the workflows and check the content and verify that the information is indeed correct, or that the assumptions that are being made are even valid, right? That's why the human element is still needed, especially in today's market. And it's even more important now more than ever to get people into that mindset so they're not looking at this as, I'm not going to learn about AI because it's just going to take my job, and the more I can delay it, the longer I can keep my job. That is the wrong mentality.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's no question there are efficiencies to be made there, which will ultimately allow organizations to thrive if they adopt those efficiencies correctly. But I think from a human perspective, I think you're right. There's definitely reticence to adopt some of these technologies just because they think, well, if I adopt it, it means I'm giving in, and that means I'm not going to have a job. Whereas actually, there are tools out there. I mean, you mentioned some of them. Like, so just for example, I have to use our own personal example, but like our clients, for example, were worried about some of the tools we had in terms of our e-learning authoring or in terms of our learning management because of the AI adoption within it. But we promote the same thing that you've been talking about, which is essentially, you can't do this without humans. Like, it requires quality assurance. It requires whatever it produces, even though it's great and all that, it still requires the right expertise, the right eyes, the right knowledge to be able to then go, yes, no, change, edit, whatever. So it's just making everything more efficient and hopefully bringing the quality up, but it still requires a good level of expertise to actually, go and perform those tasks. So yeah, I agree totally. There is a mindset issue, I think, with elements there. But so just very quickly, because we've got so many questions we could talk about here, and where we could go on and on, which is great. But in terms of like the difference between, let's say, people that you're training in the workplace and the people that you're teaching in the evenings, etc., at universities, etc., are there similar mindsets there, or are there kind of like you're seeing something slightly different with the people that in the workplace and slightly different with the people? Are they all kind of the same, or is there quite a difference between how they're adopting their approaches?
I'd say there are quite a few similarities in the sense that there is a concern that AI is going to replace certain portions or certain, if not portions of their job, definitely their job in its entirety. There are concerns, though, of what I'm also seeing around, I would say, a lack of understanding that's universal across the board of what exactly can AI and these large language models do for me? Because I think they don't know what they don't know. So we have some people on both ends of the spectrum that are treating it like a Google search versus actually looking at it more like an assistant or some sort of productivity assistant that can help them to automate certain tasks. Case in point, you have teachers that are looking at AI to create lesson plans, to create, for example, certain evaluations, or they'll use it to create materials they can now share with their students. So it is a huge time saver, which is amazing. On the opposite end, you have people that in the corporate side who are using it in its most base model form. Take this email that I've created and just rewrite it, simplify it, change it so that it sounds more professional, or change the tone. So, or they're creating templates, or they're creating something that I did a couple of weeks ago just as a test. I created an agenda for an executive presence session that I was putting together for my team. And I just asked ChatGPT, here are the parameters, here's the content I want you to pull from, create this agenda for me. Okay, let's create a workbook from it. And it did it. But the one element, I would say there's actually two elements that both sides are kind of missing the point on in some cases. One, just because AI created these wonderful documents for you, it doesn't mean that you should trust them 100% as being accurate.
Agreed.
There's still an element of you still have to go in and make sure that it's correct. You have to still go in and make sure that the information makes sense, or there isn't a misinterpretation, or worse yet, in some, I would say some cases, the information is just plain outright wrong. So there is an element there. You still have to validate and verify your work. Then the second element of it, I think, is also the fact that there's a perception of kind of like the Google search from, and dating myself really badly from the earlier decades ago, where it's, I just asked Google a question and it gave me this answer. This is great. This is wonderful. They're putting in the same mentality into the Chat GPT or the Copilot or the Gemini platform. And when they don't get the response, or they don't get the answer, or the document, or even the graphic, if they're creating graphics and images that they expected, they assume the language model doesn't work, it's broken, I'm not going to use it anymore, and therefore this is terrible. What they're not realizing is, like anything else, we have to still train the model, we have to teach the model, we have to get it comfortable with not only the way that we explain things, where to pull information, before, depending on whether you have an enterprise license or you're working with a personal license, are you able to properly say, here are the sources I want you to pull information from? All that is great and necessary, right? But at the end of the day, you still have to remember, it's a fallible tool created by a fallible being, aka humans, and therefore it can make mistakes. It will make mistakes, and therefore it's still important for us to make sure that, again, we're validating. It's important for us to make sure that, okay, well, it didn't get me there 100% of the way, but what if it could get me there 60% of the way, 70, heck, even 50% of the way? That's still a greater efficiency in terms of time savings that we can get back, that we can then use to focus on other things. And what that really means is we really need to have people look at this from a different perspective, change their mindset on what AI can be, what these large language models are. They have to look at them as assistants who can make mistakes, just like your normal flesh and blood assistant, right? We have to still say, it may not always be perfect, but it can get me halfway there and still buy me some efficiencies and other benefits that I may not have realized as of yet.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, if I had to sit there and do the research on executive presence and put together the content that I had to put together, I did that in about 20 minutes with ChatGPT. It would have taken me a lot more time, research it, synthesize it, put things together, draft things together. So again, there's time savings there. And it's why we need to also look at our end users on both ends, education and on the corporate side of good enough, maybe good enough just to get you started. It could be maybe a thought starter that's ultimately created that you can take to the next level, but it's not going to do all of your work for you. And that's the mindset that needs to happen, or the growth mindset that needs to happen among all of the different populations when it comes to using these tools.
Well, before I ask for another question, I mean, the reason why that worked for you in your example is because you have the expertise and the knowledge to then check it, right? So, what would have taken you, X amount of time previously, you go, okay, I'm going to use ChatGPT to sort of make this task more efficient. You go through the process, but because it takes 20 minutes, it's because you're able to then quality assure what's come back and go, yeah, okay, that's correct, because you have that knowledge that you've gained over many years of expertise and experience to be able to then validate it. The problem is sometimes is when people who are coming in from maybe at junior positions or from elsewhere without that experience, they're trying to just get these LLMs to produce something for them. And they actually, in some cases, don't always know whether it's right or wrong. They're just assuming it is because it must be like Google. So they then produce that work, send it across, and someone goes, where did you get this? This isn't right, because they haven't validated it, right? So it's, but on that then, just very quickly, can you give me have you got a specific example of anybody where you've seen someone get it? Where it changed for them? What have you got anything like that?
A good example, I think, would be I had a student, college student, who basically went in, was clearly using ChatGPT to create a lot of their own administrative tasks. So again, lesson plans. They were creating materials they were going to give to their students. But what they weren't doing, they weren't checking it. Because somebody said, oh my God, look at this. I just saved myself hours of work. And they were just spitting out and taking whatever they pulled out of it and just gave it to students. So one of the students from my class shared some documentation that they created using, but they didn't tell me it was with ChatGPT. They just said, oh, here's examples of what I've created. Here's my lesson plans. The moment I looked at it, I immediately knew that it was ChatGPT or some other large language model, because the phrasing, the word choices that were being used, the way the sentences were constructed. I just looked at this and I said, there's no way you wrote this. There's absolutely no way. And after some back and forth, that person admitted, yeah. I said, okay, great. I don't have a problem with you using those tools, but I have a problem with you trying to pass it off as, look what I did. Which I know for a fact you don't know. But the other element of that is also going, did you even validate that this is even correct? Anything's missing? Is there anything that you know for sure that if you were to hand this over in your school, in your district, that it's valid? Well, what do you mean? And that's when it just blew my mind of, okay, I need to sit down with my students and say, if you're going to use these models, here's how you have to quality control the situation. Don't just spit it out. Do a separate search. Go onto Google or whatever your platform of choice is. Do some quick searches. Key concepts. Pick some random ideas and just start looking and comparing them and saying, is this in line with what I'm seeing? So what I'm trying to get my students to do is to think about this from a more practical perspective. You want to use these tools? You want to generate your own content from ChatGPT? Great. I want you still to check and verify. Check and verify, because if they don't, and there's something that's glaringly wrong, that could be a quick ticket to damaging someone's own personal brand and career very, very quickly, especially if they're sending this off to their leadership and beyond, right? I think it's important also to get folks, both corporate and in education, into this mindset of check and verify. You want to use these tools, you still have to check and verify, regardless of how great it looks. If you're doing it just to spit something out, to hand it in for the sake of handing it in, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing also the population that you're serving a disservice as well, because now you have information that's going to be out there that's completely either incorrect or in some cases misleading, to say the least.
Before we continue, a quick thank you from our sponsor, OpenELMS Learning Generator. With just a text prompt or document, AI instantly builds a full professional course, complete with video presenters, quizzes, animations, and voiceovers in any language. You can edit everything online and export it as e-learning, a PowerPoint or video. You can even export it as a podcast or video game experience. The best part, you can try it free for 14 days and see how you can use this special agentic AI system to transform your training at openelms.ai. Back to the show.
Yeah, agreed. Very much so. Excellent. Thank you. So Clear Channel operates in an industry that's fundamentally built on human relationships. So people buying from people generally, right? Trust developed through face-to-face connection, etc. Right? So you're responsible for implementing technology and AI capabilities to a certain extent as well. So how do you navigate that tension between scaling learning through technology whilst preserving what makes advertising successful? Genuine human connection.
The beauty of it so far is because our focus is on the people relationships. What it's forced us to do in many ways is when we launch some of these different tools, we've been involved in trying to help our teams figure out how to use it. How do we guide them? Our VP of sales training, we have a VP of sales training and sales effectiveness. His focus is on sales skills specifically. He ran a session with the CTO and others that focused just on how can you use, for example, Microsoft Copilot in its base form to be able to create seed letters, to create introductory comments that they can add to their emails that will at least get a response, or even in some cases, phone scripts that all focus on our value proposition, that focus on it's all about them, not us. Make it always about the advertiser, the person that you're talking to, and don't just make it about what we do, how great we are. It's all about how does the value of our solutions tie back to their need, their want, and more importantly, the problem that they're trying to solve. So with that approach, we've been able to at least guide people on how to use these tools. And it's, again, without getting into too many crazy things, just to use it for the purposes of creating these basic materials that will help you to prospect, to connect with our customers, to include those human elements of, again, of personality, of customizing a need and a want that they have in our communications, so it, again, brings some level of efficiency for our salespeople. We're taking a similar approach now. We're actually surveying the rest of our employee base just to understand, again, how they're looking to use these tools. What are their biggest challenges? What are their biggest questions? And spoilers, no shock, they don't know what they don't know, so they want somebody to tell them, sit down and show me all the features and benefits of these tools. But it's not just about features and benefits, right? It's also about how do you use this in the context of work, which to me is a human element. How do you use these tools so that it's not just about, I'm going to throw 20,000 plus lines of data from an Excel spreadsheet into ChatGPT and let it synthesize it and analyze it for me. That's great, but it's like, but who is this for? Who is your audience, right? Who are you developing this analysis, this presentation for? And again, we're trying to ground everything in the purpose of who is this going to ultimately be seen by? Who's ultimately the audience? Who's ultimately going to read this? Because that helps us to ground things in terms of just treating it like basic workflow of summarize all of the meetings I have next week with this person, or summarize the following meeting notes. Those are all great and wonderful things that ChatGPT can do and these large language models. But again, it's about remembering the human element, because eventually I think the next frontier for some of this is when we start developing solid use cases by role, by function, by, in some cases, by the task forces that we bring together to solve a key problem. Knowing how to use a tool is one piece of it. Keeping that human element is also a second piece of it. The third piece of it is, again, putting the compliance hat on, making sure that ethically we are capturing information that is both usable for us in format that doesn't cause any problems or any issues, whether it's employee data, whether it's advertiser/customer information. We also have to make sure, again, are they using the right platform so that we're not sending things out into the cloud that people can discover. So it's that human element, that human-centric approach and mentality is something that we're really trying to push in all of our end users, and not just see it as, we'll just spit out every single advertiser that's in, I don't know, that sells coffee in a 5-mile radius that does these things. It's like, what else can we get out of it? It's going to give us that more personal touch so we can make those connections.
Definitely. So just going down there a little bit more, there's an old saying, it's a film I love, I can't remember which film. Oh, I said, Remember the Titans, that's it. Attitude reflects leadership, right? So I'm curious about the role of leadership in successful technology adoption, right? So you must be seeing some different approaches from leaders, not just within your own organization, but potentially across, different organizations you may have, be coming across, certainly in your role and what your company does. So you're obviously going to see some who are embracing AI, some who resist it, some who have unrealistic expectations. We've touched on this a little bit already, but what do you think separates leaders who successfully guide their teams through technology adoption from those who struggle?
The biggest thing that I've noticed, and it's not just with a Fear Channel outdoor, but recently I attended a couple of weeks ago the CLO exchange, where I got to meet with other learning and development professionals across multiple industries. And as you can imagine, AI usage and leadership around usage of these tools was a very hot topic. And the one thing that continuously came up was those who are willing to be in I like to call it testing mode. Those who are willing to test, those who are willing to at least tell their people, look, I don't know, I'm going to admit it, I don't know all the answers, but let's test and figure out together how this can work. I think that goes a long way versus there are leaders who may look at this and say, well, because I know nothing about it, I'm not familiar, I'm not comfortable with it, I don't even want to talk about it, I'm not even going to mention it. And as long as nobody comes and asks me if everything's okay, that's more of an ego issue, I think, than anything else. But it's also the fact that, look, like all human beings, we all have an ego, right? The question becomes, I may not know anything about a certain topic, but it's okay if I don't. I would rather admit I don't know enough about this topic. I'm going to defer to this other person. Or, for example, I have somebody on my team who is definitely using ChatGPT to create all kinds of content. I defer to her as my ChatGPT expert because I know for myself I can do certain things, and I'm definitely focused in one area of it, right? She's going down a very specific path that we can replicate, that we can use among our L&D teams. And it's like, guys, again, this isn't about hoarding knowledge. This isn't about somebody becoming the expert. This is about knowledge sharing. This is about creating those shareable moments so that we're all able to support ourselves. Because what you don't want, and I saw some semblance of this early on before we started doing some of the training and some of the, I would say, support and creating these knowledge libraries and prompts. There was like 1 or 2 people that I encountered who were hoarding the knowledge. They didn't want to share. They saw it as a competitive differentiator between them and other teams or other parts of the organization, which I found a little shocking. But then again, at the same time, I'm like, well, it's a competitive environment, right? Of course, they're going to see it as a competitive differentiator. Luckily, that person was able to share with us some of their thoughts, their ideas, what they're doing, and how they're preparing their teams. But in ways that say, okay, this is very practical, replicable. Are we okay to use this, right? Would you be willing to be part of these conversations? and bring them along into the journey. So it's not just about, hi, I heard this great idea, I'm just going to take it and run with it. Because it's also about building credibility, right? I need our people to feel that the person who's telling them these things has done this in some form or fashion, even though they know we're all at a similar or different varying levels of starting points. But if they see somebody who's already using it and is being successful, that's going to go a long way, which is why the leadership role in this is super important, even if they are not the most technical of the leaders. And that's the mindset shift we had to get a lot of our folks to just at least embrace. You don't have to be the expert. As leaders, we tend to be, we want to be the experts. We want to be the people that they go to for all the answers. This is a case where it's okay if they don't. But we just need to be willing to show that we're willing to learn and model those kinds of behaviors so that our employees are able to at least emulate them and at least make attempts in driving their understanding and knowledge of these tools further.
Yeah, I mean, we've had previous conversations with obviously other leaders from a variety of different sectors so far, and one of the ones was this discussion around kind of vulnerability and leadership being used as a strength, because we've got so used to, as you said there, you touched on that kind of people using this kind of prompting or knowledge of prompting or whatever as if they've mastered it, then it becomes something that gives them a competitive edge. But actually, that's not, it might help them individually, fair enough, but actually it's going to probably hinder a lot of what people are trying to do in your organization. And actually being vulnerable to say, okay, I've either mastered this or I haven't, but I'm either going to humble myself and allow others to share in this knowledge, or I don't have enough knowledge in this. But that doesn't make me a bad leader. Being open to understand, to learn, to try, to fail in the adoption of all of these things is could be considered just as strong for an organization right now, rather than just, well, I've got all the knowledge and so people can come to me because I'm the master, which is a place to be.
I mean, it's something where for example, I started recently sending any what I call successful prompts that I use, whether it was creating some sort of documentation, doing some further research on a particular topic, or just, for example, I'm currently testing, creating a bit of a agentic AI coach around certain materials when it comes to objection handling, for example. Something that we wanted to create as a basic guide for our employees, right? So I had to sit there and put together the documents that we're going to use as our source of truth, link them to the chat, to the agentic AI, and then forming the questions that most likely our sellers or new sellers are going to ask. I haven't released this yet, but it's just, I thought, proud enough of the work that I shared it with my team so they could see the prompts, they could see the questions, they can just see, like, this is just what I was spitballing one day, putting together these ideas. Like, imagine what some of you guys can do with some of the great ideas that you have. So it's, modeling those things, even if they're not perfect, just getting people to see, like, hey, I'm making the attempt, I'm making some sort of effort to it. I encourage the rest of you to do the same thing. Do you have to sit there and build an agentic AI model? Absolutely not. But what you can do is, again, take an idea that you have and see, can ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, can one of these platforms do it better for me? Or take it to another level that I may not have even considered.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as leaders, we have to be comfortable with at least showing that vulnerability and being okay if somebody comes back and says, well, actually, you could have done it this way. Great. That's a teachable moment for each and every single one of us.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So you've obviously researched and explored a lot of third-party learning platforms like LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, I'm assuming, podcasting, as informal adult learning, communities of practice in the workplace, for example. And so from your research perspective, what have you discovered that most corporate L&D functions are getting wrong about how adults actually learn?
I would say in its most simplest form, one of the biggest challenges that I think, especially in a fast-paced moving environment, there is this belief that I'm going to go through some sort of e-learning, some sort of video, and I'm going to have everything that I need. I took a Udemy course, and therefore I should know everything and anything related to that topic. Whereas my entire premise around this is that is the first phase of learning, because now you're getting the information, and there may be some quizzes, there may be some interactivity that's based within that kind of modality that you're learning from, but it's the first step. You still need to ingrain it, embed it into long-term memory, and the way that you're going to do that is to practice it even after the training, receive potential coaching from your leader. That's something where we want all of our leaders in any organizations see themselves not just as a leader, but as a coach as well. There are some organizations that I both consulted for and have worked for where I had a leader who said to me, it's not my job to coach people, which is shocking to me in every which way. But it's also about top down. How are they communicating the leadership requirements and the leadership pillars, if you will, of their organization? So one of the things that I find is those organizations that have the leaders who take a much more involved approach, right? You just watch this Udemy course. I'm going to question you about it. I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to actually have you apply what you learned and show me what you got out of it, and then provide with coaching and guidance. I may also have a peer, a more tenured peer, who can sit down and do something similar as well. That's community building. That is not just about validating and checking, did you get something out of the training? But it's community building that I think is a key cornerstone in any learning and development program. You have to have some sort of accountability. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through having these communities of practice, these communities of learning that need to happen. And that can start initially with the coach / the leader and the employee, but it also needs to extend to the rest of the peers and colleagues. Our VP of Sales skills training recently implemented a buddy program, which is, again, the early formation to the learning community for a program that we're running called Sales Gravy, which is focused just on sales skills, that we have all of our sellers go through. And in that program, the buddies are there for accountability. The buddies are there to help guide or coach. They're there to role play scenarios as well. So what happens is you're creating these little sub communities of learning that go a long way from taking what they're seeing in practice, because it's easy for somebody to say, I looked at it and said, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, that's great. But until you practice it in a safe space, hopefully not in front of a client, but you're doing it safely with a buddy or with a peer or with your coach. Until you can do that, it's the learning is going to be surface level at best. And if you want it to go beyond that, you need practice, you need reinforcement, you need coaching, but you need that peer level, I would say, community building mentality and approach in all of your learning.
Absolutely. It takes me back. I mean, in the UK, I'm assuming this will resonate with you as well, even in America, to the old apprenticeship model in the UK goes back to like medieval times, the guilds, where, the master and the apprentice, the learning from, whatever it might be in terms of a craft, they would learn from that master, and they'd learn their craft by watching and then following on from what they did. And then that obviously that expanded into what which you talked about, that community of practice, where as the workplace evolved past this kind of master apprentice framework, community of practices started to emerge, where people coming into a role would be submerged with other experts, not just one, but other experts that they could then become part of a community of and learn from and touch points with and things like that. And that's how people start to thrive and understand how their role plays a part in the greater good, etc. So I think it all sort of marries that way. But yeah, so I think essentially, yeah, what you're saying there is that, whatever tools people use, it still requires models to support and people to thrive in those environments. Whether it be, okay, you've got a learning module here that you can do, great, you get some knowledge from that, you can be tested for knowledge on that. You can even be tested for compliance, that you understand on things like that. But actually, when it comes to understanding the actual learning in the broader scope of the organization, that's where you need other metrics alongside it to sort of go, great, bang, there's B and there's C. We can't really say everything until you've done the whole thing, much more holistically.
Adults learn by doing. And one of the, I would say, the misperception that I've seen out there is, I created this video, I created this Udemy course or a master class or whatever it is that you're looking at. Okay, those are all great resources, and many of them designed extremely well. But again, it's the first step until you can apply and take the knowledge that you've acquired from it, right? Knowledge without application is meaningless, right? It's all about, how do I apply it? How do I practice it? Which is why, if you can do it in a safe space, in that community type of environment, with your coach, with your leader, with your peer, it goes a long way so that you can start to actually utilize it in real life scenarios, and then bring back the information like, hey, this worked, or hey, this didn't work, or maybe, you know what, I just had a learning moment because the approach I took didn't work with this kind of client, with this kind of advertiser, and we changed the following approach in this way. So it becomes this cycle of potential learning, but it's all about cultivating that learning, cultivating, and I would say the shareable stories that can then be shared across the teams. It's something that I think we do very well when we get wins from clients. What did you do? What did you do differently? And what was that aha moment? We share those with our sellers because it's important for them to hear those stories and to hear the actionable, replicable steps that they can take. Because again, watching a video on objection handling is great, but can you actually apply it? Can you actually do it? It also builds confidence, as well as giving, in this case, our AEs, not just confidence, but the level of comfort that, hey, I can make this sound natural. I can talk to it because I've practiced it. I've used it. I understand it, versus trying to do that in front of the client, which is never a good idea.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the challenges of any new technology is that organizations say they value experimentation and learning, but often inadvertently punish failure because everybody's got targets, everybody's got to hit their marks, and obviously, etc. Right? So when you're introducing sort of AI or learning capabilities or new learning approaches, how do you create genuine psychological safety for people to experiment, make mistakes, and iterate?
I think because of the approach that we're taking, at least at Clear Channel, I think it's definitely it provides us with a little bit of a cushion in that we're not replacing all of the day-to-day administrative functions at the moment, right? What we're starting out with is business development, the early sales cycle elements, such as potential prospecting, potential seed letters that are sent out. There may be some value prop information and other objection handling elements that are pulled in from the sources that we've been putting together. But the reality is we've kept it at that early on stage so that for now, all of the other elements that go beyond that in the sales cycle are all part of the normal status quo. They have to meet with the client. They still have to present to the client. They still have to, negotiate and close the deal and get the contract signed. Part of this strategy is also to get them comfortable with the idea of using these tools in a very simple way. We've definitely seen a push for a lot of the leaders getting their people to, again, use the prompts that we've shared in our prompt library you put together a little prompt library, just some basic prompts. And then how do I set up a cadence of follow-up for a particular account? How do I create a calendar entry that will just be added to my Outlook calendar through Copilot, so that I can have it already in the calendar. I can go in and just be reminded without even having to think about it, you know, when do I need to reach out to them? When do I need to engage with them? Wasn't comfortable with these tools early on, where there is what I call low impact towards any customer facing activity, right? In the sense that they haven't met the client yet. In a lot of cases, they haven't spoken to them yet. They're just trying to get in the door. They're trying to get their first meeting. So it's been a safe place where it doesn't affect them as much. But what we do encourage at the moment is, hey guys, if you're using these tools and you're not getting any meetings, we need to figure out why. And leaders, you need to figure out, what are they doing wrong? Are they not using the right prompts? Are they using, maybe what they're generating isn't the right language in the local market that you're in, right? Maybe it's too low level.
So just on that then, do you have an example of like a productive failure? So something that didn't work, but then taught you or the organization something valuable?
We've had a couple of folks who shared prompts that didn't give them exactly what they wanted, or it completely just backfired on them. I can't talk too much about the deal in particular, but of course, then came back to us and said, like, okay, like, what did I do wrong? What did I, because they were looking at the information like, this is correct. And I'll go, first and foremost, when looking at the prompt itself wasn't exactly customized enough to the local market. So it looks like it's what they did. I'm going to paraphrase this. Show me top verticals in my market that just got seed money and are looking to invest in advertising. They got a list. They started going through that list as their prospecting list, but what they should have done is they should have tried to ask more questions and get to a much more finite subset of prospects, because some of those prospects, those are people are not advertising with us. They're probably not going to advertise with us anytime soon, or it's going to take significantly a lot more time than a couple of weeks or a couple of months to close those deals. So what we've been pushing our folks to do is, don't just give it one single question. You need to ask the model more questions, refine it, get to a simple point to say, I want all supermarket chains in El Paso that have just acquired seed money or that opened a new location, that have advertised with us before or have advertised in some form or fashion with any other company. Because then we can look and see, oh, this is the creative. This is what they were actually advertising on Instagram. Or maybe they did this with another billboard company, or they did this in print, right? It gives us a lot more intelligence when we keep asking more and more questions. It's not just the one question and it's solved. And that's a shift in mindset that we've had to put into our people to say, look, you may fail and not get the answer that you want. You may fail in terms of trying to close these deals, but the reality is we are not a for-profit company, so we need you to start getting some deals in. But what's important is it's okay for them to fail, make mistakes, as long as they learn from it. And that's the cap. Are they learning from, or are they just repeating the same cycle of failure? But that to me becomes also a question of, what is the leader/coach doing to coach and guide them out of that cycle, right? To give them the psychological safety that they need. Okay, this didn't work. Let's try this instead. Or, hey, Jim down the block actually did something a little different. Let's see if this might work for you. So it's having that open mindset where it's not just cycles of repeatable failure, but it's about, okay, I failed. How are you being coached? How are you being, prepped to try to make the necessary change so that you don't necessarily fail again? And if you do fail again, learn from it and take it to the next level. But it has to go hand in hand with coaching. It has to go hand in hand with employees meeting with their leaders and or their buddies or their coaches and validating that what I'm doing is working.
Well, it's a lot of, again, human connection. I mean, we come back to it, but it's
all about human connection. This is why, again, it's folks, it's still going to be human connection. Human connection has to remain part of this equation. It will remain part of this equation. It's just a question of how does it evolve, how does it change, and how do we improve these AI tools to help us? Because again, the human element doesn't go away.
Absolutely. You've got this remarkable vantage point. So 1 foot in corporate L&D, 1 foot in academia, and you're watching AI reshape both worlds simultaneously. So let's imagine that we're having this conversation 5 years from now, 2029. What do you think we'll look back on today and say we were worried about completely the wrong things? Or conversely, what are we missing that's actually going to be critically important?
I think we're going to find ourselves in the similar vein of how most educational technologies are looked at the time of their launch. Years ago, when CDs and DVDs were launched, people were spitting out the end of education. No more teachers because you're going to just watch a video on a DVD or a CD. And guess what? That has not come to pass. Same thing happened when Google launched its Google browser. And people were like, that's it. You don't need libraries. You don't need schools or teachers. You don't need these other things. Everything you need will be at your fingertips. Well, a couple of decades in, we're still using the tool, but we're still requiring people in human involvement. I think we're going to be in a similar boat. Most educational technologies or any technology in general has seen that kind of initial fear and initial, I would say, predilections for doom and gloom. And then most of them don't emerge. It just becomes a different way that we're operating. Now, will I say that these tools have had impacts in terms of how we do certain jobs, how we perform certain functions? Absolutely. That will not change. And I think things are still evolving. As AI gets better, we will definitely see more and more capabilities that we haven't even thought about that could be either automated or enhanced. But I still feel that the human element will be there. What that I think will probably lead to is more than likely there will be different jobs, maybe jobs that we don't even have names for yet. But it doesn't mean that work goes away. Work will just take on different functions, which means what teachers and school systems will have to teach will have to change in a certain context, right? You still need to know how to do math. You still need to know how to read. You still need to think critically. Those things don't go away. But it's the inclusion of these other AI tools as a normal part of our day-to-day, whether it's for personal use, work, or education purposes.
Definitely.
So to me, it's just going to be we're going to be in a place kind of almost not laughing at ourselves, but saying to ourselves, wow, we were worried about certain things. Now, it doesn't mean that there are certain industries that will not be impacted. There are some industries that may be impacted, especially those. I mean, you're seeing it now. Fast food chains, you have a lot of fast food restaurants that are going with automatic registers versus having a person in front of it. But even with it, you still need to have somebody in the background. If somebody has a question, if an order goes wrong, right? We have to think of it as the amount of jobs that will be available, I think, will be determined by how much we automate with these tools. But it also will impact, again, what are the skill set that they need to have. And again, it's a lot of those skills are going to be human-related skills. Customer service. How do you problem solve? How do you relate to the person that's having an issue or some sort of problem? And then they're going to have the more technical skills that will help them to either validate processes, program the AI, or add on to the body of knowledge that's going to be the main source of information for our large language models. So I mean, that's just me thinking off the top of my head, but there's probably many other layers to this. But I think we will find ourselves in a place where things have evolved, but in many ways, the human element still remains the same.
Awesome. Last thing I always say to ask this to everybody: what's the one thing you want every L&D leader listening, or every person who's listening, to take away from this conversation today? What would it be?
Don't fear the tools. Embrace them. Test. And if you fail, it's okay. I'll admittedly put out there that the first time I used ChatGPT and the first time I used Copilot, for the first couple weeks, I didn't know what I was doing. I completely butchered it. I was getting, I forget even the right answer. It was just so clear to me. I didn't know how to even write a prompt properly. I wasn't following up with the prompt with other questions. I really didn't know what I was doing. And until I started kind of researching it and getting information from others and being willing to share that I didn't know something, a lot of it started coming together. And like everyone else, I'm still learning. I'm still learning like everyone else. So we have to be okay with the fact that this is something that is evolving so fast. We have to be okay with it not being what I call the quote unquote experts. What we have to be okay with is being, we're the experts at this moment, knowing that it's going to change again in a couple weeks, in a couple months. And then we just have to learn it again and continue that level of mastery and continue that level of becoming masters over and over again. It's kind of like the lifelong learner journey, except that we're going to be doing it a lot more often when it comes to understanding these tools and these capabilities. And so be okay being uncomfortable, be okay not knowing everything. And collaborating with others to form these communities of knowledge that we're going to need to help each other.
Rem, thank you so much for your time and your invaluable insights. Very much appreciated. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening will take a lot away from that conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.